The 195th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the ball. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina is upset. Number 1 Oklahoma. And ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered by Minnie.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. Worthy fired. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions. The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's what it's all about.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey, we're welcome to introduce the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh Anthony back with you guys to talk about Carolina's 3-game experience in the ACC Tournament where they fell just short of making the ACC final, losing to Florida State in the semis. We're going to break down all 3 games. The first 2, not as in-depth as, of course, the loss to Florida State. And Carolina got their seeding last night as the NCAA Tournament bracket was revealed. And we'll break that down as well as Carolina knows their fate to make a run in March Madness. But we'll start with the ACC Tournament. And we went into that expecting Carolina to make somewhat of a run, to play really, really well. And I think they did both of those things. They made a run to the semis after starting on Wednesday. They won on Wednesday. They won on Thursday and played a really hard-fought game on Friday night before losing to Florida State. And I thought they played really well, mainly in the game against Notre Dame as a whole, the second half against Virginia Tech, and then they had spurts in that game against Florida State. But I think in that in those 3 games, they played the best we've seen them play consecutively all season long in terms of 3 games where they played at a really high level for a portion of the game. In that game against Notre Dame, the matchup with them is always hard because they play smaller, they spread you out, and you got to defend the 3-point line. Carolina did that in the first match between these 2 teams back in January, but if you remember, Carolina had to have a running layup by Leaky Black to prevail and win that game a little over 2 months ago. This game, not that close. Carolina was up 14 at halftime, 50-36, the highest first half point margin under Roy Williams in the ACC Tournament, en route to a 101-59 win. This was a game where Carolina simply took the will out of Notre Dame. Notre Dame had it a 12-point game at a little under the 13, 14-minute mark in the second half, and as Jay Billis made commented on the broadcast, they were still very much in the ballgame. And then Carolina blitzed them with a 47-4 extended run that effectively ended the game. And it was a lot like the Duke game in Chapel Hill a week ago, where every time we thought Notre Dame was going to punch back and make it a game, Carolina responded. And for a team that all season long had the inability to never put games away, they were able to do that in the ACC Tournament against Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you would have wanted in that first game, especially with the fact that we were a little bit concerned about them playing a Notre Dame team that came off a win against Florida State right before they got into the ACC Tournament. You were worried about, coming off a huge win over Duke. What would the mindset be for this team, a team that Roy Williams has said really just can't handle big wins, to be real honest with you. But they came out and played probably their best overall game of the season. That was just a complete performance. I mean, you look, the big guys, again, played extremely well, exactly what you thought. That was what was the difference between the first game and, this game that Carolina played later in the year, was the fact that you had, at the time when they played Notre Dame earlier in the season, you were lucky if you would have two bigs that would have a good night and, a good game in the same night. Now it's completely different. Now you're looking at, more than likely, two of your guys are going to have good nights, maybe even a third on most nights. And then if you get that fourth guy playing well, that's when everything sort of comes together. But I thought the biggest thing in this game was the fact that you saw R.J. Davis step up and have a really big game for Carolina. And this is, something that we're going to talk about when we talk about the NCAA tournament and how Carolina can make a run. The guard play is huge in tournaments. I know that Carolina still needs to put the ball inside. They need to be able to pound some of these teams down low, because that's where they're going to be able to have the most success. But if they want to win games like they did in the ACC tournament, they're going to have something from the guards. They're going to have some shooting from the outside. That's what they got in this game, and it was really the start, sort of set the stage for the next night's game against Virginia Tech. But, yeah, this was a huge win for Carolina coming out in a game that we were concerned about because of, the potential letdown factor, and that wasn't a problem at all in this game, as they absolutely destroyed Notre Dame.
Yeah, Carolina's bigs, all three of them, as Garrison Brooks set the night out for a precautionary reason after twisting his ankle against Duke. All three recorded a double-double. Walker Kessler off the bench with 16 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 blocks. Almost had a triple-double with blocks. Armando Bacot, who was Carolina's best player in the ACC tournament, got it off with a 20-point, 13-point rebound performance, and Daron Sharp, 14 points, 10 rebounds. But while Carolina was able to blow out a team by 42, which now makes it the second time in ACC play that Carolina beat a ACC opponent by 40-plus, joining that win over Louisville, it was their defense. They held Notre Dame to 31% shooting from the field, only 7 of 26 from behind the three-point line. They forced 16 turnovers, which they converted into 24 points. And they pounded them on the glass, 54-31, including 25 offensive rebounds at halftime. Carolina had more offensive rebounds in the first half than Notre Dame had total rebounding, and it was just a simple fact that Carolina was able to wear them down. Their bench outscored their bench 27-13. Their bench, or that was their second chance points. Their bench points 45-19. Points in the paint 56-20. Fast break points 19-6, and it was just a really good start for Carolina, because you never want to have to play a tough game first if you got to win 4 games in 4 days. They were able to get some guys out and get them rested for Virginia Tech, which turned out to be, I think, what everyone thought it was going to be. Virginia Tech was entering that game really with a lot to prove, because they hadn't played in almost 2 weeks, and their schedule was able to lend them the record that they had, finishing fourth or third in the ACC. They didn't play, but things like 2 of the top 6 or 8 teams, but in league play, they had a really easy, manageable schedule. And of course, with COVID, they missed some of their games. And this team came out ready to play. They actually jumped up on Carolina, leading 35-32 at halftime. But like in other big games this year, Carolina was able to punch back in the second half, and they were able to take control of this game. But in this game, yes, it was Armando Bacot that was leading the charge. He had another double-double, 17 points, 13 rebounds. You mentioned R.J. Davis having a good game against Notre Dame. That carried over to the Virginia Tech game. Career-high 19 points, 6 of 10 shooting, 4 of 7 from behind the three-point line, 4 rebounds. He had a stretch where he made a three-pointer, then he got a steal, got an and one, kind of taunted the guy after he finished through the contact, which I absolutely loved. Carolina needs that kind of edge, that level of toughness. And he gave you a glimpse of what he can be in the future, but what Carolina is going to need him to be now that we're moving into the NCAA Tournament. But this was a game where Carolina, not at its best, 44% from the field. They did shoot 8 of 21 from 3, which is a really good number for this team, but they were only 17 of 27 from the foul line. But yet they found a way to win to get to Florida State into semifinal on Friday.
Yeah, this was just one of those games that you could tell from the minute that the game started that it was going to be a rock fight. This was going to be a grinded-out win if you were going to find a way to get through to the next round. Like you said, Virginia Tech had a pretty strange season in the ACC, this is still a really good basketball team. There's a reason why Mike Young was ACC Coach of the Year. And Carolina got just about everything that Virginia Tech could throw at them. But they sustained it. And that's what I think shows that there is growth with this team. That's a game that earlier in the season they lose, for sure. I don't think there's any way they win that game. You mentioned RJ Davis. After this game, and that's why, I kind of wish we had done a podcast after that game. His first two games in the ACC tournament sort of reminded me of Marcus Page back in 2013 in the ACC tournament, where all of a sudden you saw him become a more confident player, and you started to say in your head, this guy is getting it, and he's going to be a really good player going forward. I think we always knew that, but you never really saw him put back-to-back games together even so far this year because he's a freshman. That's just what it is. There's inconsistencies in his game. But those two games against Notre Dame and then against Virginia Tech took care of the basketball about as well as he could, made the shots that he needed to from the outside, and was aggressive driving the basket. That's what you want to see from RJ Davis. I thought one of the things in this game, when Carolina took over, it was clear that, the ability to get on the offensive glass and get rebounds was important. I think Jay Billis pointed it out, perfectly early in the game, was that Carolina was taking way too many jumpers. It leads to long rebounds. That's not where Carolina has success. You need some of those in close looks where even if you miss, they're going to be short rebounds. It allows guys to go right back up with the ball and finish quickly. And that's what you saw in the second half. But I also think one of the big things about that, and you can see something that's going to be key for Carolina going forward into the NCAA tournament, is when they started to have their most success, they were a much more aggressive team in terms of pushing the pace. That's what you have got to do in this tournament. This team, I think early in the season we sort of questioned whether this was a team that really was going to thrive playing in, with a fast pace. We thought maybe this was a team that would have some more success in the half court just because of how young they were. That's not the case anymore. Now this team, you can see that when they're at their best, it's when the ball is flying up and down the court. And that's what they need to be able to do going into the NCAA tournament, I think, in certain situations. Like, clearly you're not going to have that. Teams are going to make baskets on you. You still have to make things happen in the half court. But when you have those chances to get out and run and make things happen, they need to be able to do that. That was part of the reason why they were able to beat Virginia Tech.
There will never be a team coached by Roy Williams that is better in the half court than it is in the open court. He doesn't coach his teams to execute as efficiently that way. So once Carolina, it was never them learning, it was more about them learning when to run and how to run, as opposed to just would they be successful or not. You've got 4 freshman guards in your backcourt. They weren't going to know when you're supposed to push the ball, when they're not. They're learning that now. They're being more aggressive, and that's why you've seen the uptick in their fast break offense and why they're scoring the ball a lot easier. But a lot like in this game, as when they've won other big games, with this win gave Carolina their 11th quad 1 and quad 2 win, which was the most in the ACC. It's right on the defensive end of the court, and they defended a lot better, a lot harder in the second half. Virginia Tech still shot 47% from the field and 44% from three. Those are really, really good numbers, and numbers that you usually win a basketball game by. But Carolina made them work for those shots, and they were able to wear them down. Even though Carolina was playing their second game as in many days, Carolina's depth was just as important in this game as it has been all year long. Their bench outscored their bench 36-8, and there's no keeping Carolina off the glass for 40 minutes. Virginia Tech was able to keep them off the glass for the first half, and that's the best we've seen a team rebound with Carolina that isn't Florida State, because no other team besides FSU has the size that Carolina has. But for 40 minutes, Armando Bacot, Garrison Brooks, those guys, their length, their motors, it all just wore down Virginia Tech, and Carolina was able to get to a big win and get themselves into the ACC Tournament semifinals with a rubber match with Florida State, who was able to advance via by Duke not being able to play because they had COVID issues in their program. And this going in, I wish there would have been a more capacity crowd in Greensboro Coliseum, because that was a high-level tournament game that was kind of lessened by there not being that kind of a normal environment that you would see, especially in Greensboro, where if Carolina would have had a more prevalent fan support, they may have been able to come back and complete a comeback to win the game. Ultimately, Carolina fell short.